I never thought a stupid play fight would be the moment everything changed. But there I was, pinned beneath Cassius on my living room floor, both of us suddenly silent, and I could feel my entire world shifting on its axis. Let me back up, because this story doesn't start there. It starts 3 months earlier, on a Tuesday that felt like every other Tuesday in my mediocre existence. My name is Jake, I'm 27, and I'd been living in the same cramped apartment in Portland for 2 years, working a job I tolerated at a graphic design firm, going through the motions of a life that felt like it was happening to someone else. I'd known I was gay since I was 14, came out at 19, and had dated exactly 3 guys in the 8 years since. 3, and none of them lasted more than 4 months. I'd convinced myself I was fine with it, that I was just picky, that the right person would come along eventually. But the truth, I wouldn't admit even to myself, was that I was terrified. Terrified of being vulnerable, of letting someone actually see me, of wanting something so badly that losing it would destroy me. Then Cassius moved into the apartment next door. I heard the moving truck first, the beeping as it backed up, the sound of heavy furniture being dragged across hardwood floors. I was working from home that day, trying to focus on a logo redesign that was due by Friday, and the noise was driving me crazy. I'd gone through 2 cups of coffee and was debating a third when there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, I found myself looking at someone who seemed to have been designed specifically to make me forget how to form words. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with deep brown skin and these incredible eyes that were almost amber in the afternoon light streaming through the hallway window. His hair was cut short, neat, and he had this smile that made me feel like I'd just stepped into sunlight after being in the dark for years. "Hey, I'm Cassius," he said, extending his hand. "I'm moving in next door. Sorry about the noise. We're almost done." I shook his hand, very aware that mine was probably clammy. "Jake, and it's fine. Don't worry about it. I'm trying to get my couch through the door, and it's not cooperating. You wouldn't happen to have a few minutes to help, would you? I know it's a lot to ask someone you just met, but my friend who was supposed to help bailed last minute, and the movers already left." I should have been annoyed. I had work to do, a deadline looming, and helping strangers move furniture wasn't on my agenda. But something about him made me say yes immediately. His apartment was chaos. Boxes everywhere, furniture at odd angles, the kind of disorder that comes with uprooting your entire life and trying to reassemble it somewhere new. The couch in question was stuck at an angle in the doorway, one of those modern pieces that looks deceptively simple, but is actually a geometric nightmare to maneuver. We spent 20 minutes angling it, lifting it, rotating it, laughing at how ridiculous the whole situation was. At one point, I was pressed against the door frame, holding one end while Cassius pushed from the other side, and I could smell his cologne, something warm and cedar-like that made my head spin. When we finally got it through, we both collapsed onto it, breathing hard, grinning at each other like we'd just conquered Everest instead of basic furniture placement. "I owe you," Cassius said, still catching his breath. "Seriously, let me buy you dinner sometime this week." I should have played it cool, should have said something casual and non-committal. Instead, I said, "How about tonight?" That first dinner turned into coffee the next morning. Coffee turned into helping him unpack. Unpacking turned into movie nights, into inside jokes, into the kind of friendship that feels like it's been there forever, even though it's only been weeks. Cassius worked as a physical therapist at a clinic downtown. He'd moved to Portland from Chicago for the job, leaving behind an ex-boyfriend who'd cheated on him and a family who still weren't entirely comfortable with who he was. He told me all of this over the course of those early weeks, late-night conversations on one of our couches, sharing the kind of truths you usually keep locked away. I told him things too, about my own family, about my dad, who'd stopped talking to me for 2 years after I came out, about the loneliness that had become so familiar I'd stopped noticing it most days, about how I'd been sleepwalking through my life, going through motions without really feeling anything. "You're too young to be this resigned," Cassius said one night, looking at me with those intense eyes. "You deserve more than just existing, Jake." The thing about Cassius was that he made everything feel possible. He had this energy, this way of being fully present in every moment that was intoxicating. When he laughed, it was with his whole body. When he listened, you felt like you were the only person in the world. And when he touched you, even casually, a hand on your shoulder or a playful shove, it felt electric. I was falling for him. God, I was falling so hard, and I knew it was a terrible idea. He was my friend, my best friend really, even though we'd only known each other for a couple of months. He'd been through a bad breakup and wasn't looking for anything, and there was no indication he felt the same way about me. So I kept it to myself, locked it down tight, told myself I could be satisfied with friendship, that having him in my life in any capacity was better than risking everything by admitting how I felt. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday, and we'd fallen into a routine of weekend movie marathons. This time, it was my turn to host, and Cassius had brought over Thai food and a bottle of wine. We'd eaten too much, drunk maybe a glass more than we should have, and were sprawled on my couch, watching some action movie neither of us was really paying attention to. "This is so unrealistic," Cassius said, gesturing at the screen where the hero was single-handedly fighting off a dozen armed men. "Nobody moves like that in a real fight." "Oh, and you would know?" I teased. "I took martial arts for 6 years. I absolutely would know." He sat up, that competitive gleam in his eye that I'd come to recognize. "I could take you down in about 3 seconds." "That's a bold claim." "It's not a claim, it's a fact." He was grinning now, and I knew where this was heading. We'd had play fights before, stupid wrestling matches that ended with both of us laughing and out of breath. But something felt different tonight. Maybe it was the wine, maybe it was the way he was looking at me, maybe it was the months of suppressed feelings finally reaching a breaking point. "Prove it," I said. He moved fast. 1 second I was sitting on the couch, the next I was on the floor with Cassius on top of me, his hands pinning my wrists above my head. We were both laughing, but then our eyes met, and the laughter died in my throat. His face was inches from mine. I could feel the weight of him, the warmth of his body pressed against mine. His breathing had changed, gotten heavier, and I realized mine had too. One of his hands was wrapped around both my wrists, holding them against the floor, and the other had somehow ended up on my chest, right over my racing heart. "Jake," he said, and my name had never sounded like that before, rough and questioning and full of something I was afraid to name. I should have said something, should have made a joke, broken the tension, protected the friendship we'd built. But I was so tired of being afraid, so tired of hiding what I wanted. So instead, I lifted my head the few inches that separated us and kissed him. For a heartbeat, he froze, and I thought I'd made a catastrophic mistake. Then he was kissing me back, deep and desperate, like he'd been waiting for this as long as I had. His grip on my wrists tightened, and I made a sound I'd never made before, something between a gasp and a moan that should have embarrassed me but didn't. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Cassius rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. "How long?" he asked. "Since the day you moved in," I admitted. "Maybe from the moment you smiled at me in the hallway." He laughed, but it sounded shaky. "I thought I was losing my mind, thought I was just projecting what I wanted onto our friendship because I was lonely, and you were the first person in years who actually saw me." "You weren't projecting. I can see that now." He loosened his grip on my wrists, but didn't let go entirely. "I was so scared of ruining this, of losing you if I was wrong about what I was feeling." "Me too," I said. "I've been terrified." "Are you still terrified?" I thought about it, really thought about it, and the truth was, yes, I was still scared. Scared of getting hurt, scared of not being enough, scared of all the ways this could go wrong. But underneath the fear was something else, something stronger, want, hope, the possibility of something real. "Yeah," I said, "but I'm more scared of not trying." Cassius smiled, and it was different from all his other smiles. This one was soft, vulnerable, meant just for me. "Good, because I'm not letting you go now." He kissed me again, slower this time, and finally released my wrists. My hands immediately went to his face, his neck, his shoulders, everywhere I'd wanted to touch for months. We stayed on that floor for a long time, kissing and talking and kissing some more, years of loneliness melting away with every touch. Eventually, we moved to the couch, then to my bed, not for sex, but just to be close, to hold each other without the pretense of casual friendship. Cassius wrapped around me like he was trying to memorize the shape of my body, and I'd never felt safer in my life. I need to tell you something, he said into the darkness of my bedroom. That ex I told you about, the one who cheated, I stayed with him for 2 years after I found out. Kept thinking if I just tried harder, was better somehow, he'd choose me. I know that's messed up. I know I should have left immediately, but I was so afraid of being alone that I accepted less than I deserved. I turned in his arms so I could see his face. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to know that I'm working on it, on believing I deserve good things, on not sabotaging something real because I'm scared. This, us, it feels too good to be true, and I'm terrified I'm going to mess it up. You're not the only one who's terrified, I said. I've spent years protecting myself, keeping people at arm's length, because it felt safer than risking real intimacy. My longest relationship was 4 months, and I ended it because he wanted to meet my family. That's how scared I've been. So we're both disasters, Cassius said, but he was smiling. Pretty much. Want to be disasters together? I kissed him instead of answering, and he pulled me closer, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through my window and Cassius's arm draped over my waist. For a moment, I panicked, wondering if I'd dreamed the whole thing. Then he stirred, pressed a kiss to my shoulder and mumbled, "Too early, go back to sleep." I didn't go back to sleep. I just lay there, watching him, trying to memorize every detail. The way his eyelashes cast shadows on his cheeks, the small scar above his eyebrow that I'd never asked about, the peaceful expression on his face that made him look younger, less guarded. "I can feel you staring," he said without opening his eyes. "Sorry." "Don't be." He opened his eyes, and they were warm, happy. "I like it." We spent that whole weekend together, barely leaving my apartment. We talked about everything, our fears, our hopes, what we wanted from life. Cassius told me about his dream of opening his own practice someday, helping people who couldn't afford traditional physical therapy. I told him about the graphic novel I'd been working on in secret for 3 years, too afraid to show anyone because it felt too personal, too revealing. "I want to read it," he said. "It's not finished." "I don't care. I want to see it." So I showed him, pulling out the worn sketchbook from the back of my closet where I'd hidden it like a shameful secret. He spent an hour going through every page, asking questions, pointing out details he loved. When he finished, he looked at me with something like awe. "Jake, this is incredible. Why have you been hiding this?" "Because it's about being gay, about feeling different, about all the things I've spent years trying to pretend don't matter." "Those are exactly the things that make it powerful." He took my hand. "You have to finish this. You have to share it." Over the following weeks, everything shifted. We were still neighbors, still friends, but now we were something more. Something I didn't have a name for yet, but that felt vital, necessary, like breathing. We fell into new routines, morning coffee on his balcony before work, dinner together most nights, falling asleep tangled together, waking up the same way. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when my old fears would resurface, when I'd feel myself starting to pull away out of habit. And Cassius had his own demons, days when he'd get quiet and distant, convinced he was about to mess everything up. But we talked about it. We were honest, even when it was uncomfortable. And slowly, we learned how to be vulnerable with each other, how to ask for what we needed, how to trust that the other person wasn't going to leave at the first sign of difficulty. 2 months after that night on my living room floor, Cassius asked me to be his boyfriend officially. We were in his apartment, cooking dinner together, and he just stopped in the middle of chopping vegetables and said, "I want to introduce you as my boyfriend. Is that okay? Are we there?" I nearly dropped the pan I was holding. "Yes, God, yes, we're there." He grinned, set down the knife, and kissed me right there in his kitchen, and I thought about how far we'd both come, how we'd almost missed this because we were too afraid to take the risk. My life didn't magically become perfect. I still had bad days at work, still struggled with anxiety, still had moments of doubt. But now I had someone to come home to, someone who saw all of me, the good and the bad and the messy, and chose to stay anyway. And I was finishing my graphic novel. Cassius would sit with me while I drew, offering encouragement, asking questions, reminding me why the story mattered when I got discouraged. He believed in me in a way no one ever had, and it made me want to believe in myself too. 6 months in, I took him to meet my family. My parents had come around somewhat since I'd come out, but it was still awkward, still full of things we didn't talk about. I was nervous, convinced it would be a disaster. But Cassius charmed them effortlessly, asking my dad about his woodworking hobby, complimenting my mom's cooking, being so genuinely himself that it was impossible not to like him. On the drive home, he held my hand and said, "That wasn't so bad. You made it look easy." It wasn't easy, I was terrified, but you're worth being terrified for. That night, lying in bed, I realized something. I'd spent so much of my life afraid of wanting things, of putting myself out there, of being hurt. And yeah, maybe I would get hurt someday. Maybe this wouldn't last forever. But I'd rather have this messy, beautiful, real thing with Cassius, even if it was temporary, than spend another day playing it safe and feeling nothing. "I love you," I said into the darkness. Cassius went very still beside me. Then he rolled over, cupped my face in his hands, and kissed me softly. "I love you too. I've been wanting to say it for weeks, but I was scared it was too soon." "It's not too soon. Or maybe it is, and I don't care." He laughed, and it was the best sound I'd ever heard. "We're really doing this, aren't we? The whole falling in love thing." "Looks like it." "Good," he said, pulling me close. "Because I'm all in, Jake. Completely, terrifyingly all in." I held him tight, feeling his heartbeat against my chest, and thought about that day he'd knocked on my door asking for help with a couch. How I'd had no idea that saying yes would change everything. How one moment of courage, of openness, had led to this. We're still together now, a year later, still in our neighboring apartments, though we're talking about finding a place together. Still learning each other, still working through our fears and insecurities, still choosing each other every day. My graphic novel is finished. Cassius read the final pages last week and cried, which made me cry, and we ended up on the couch, holding each other, both of us overwhelmed by the vulnerability of it all. I'm meeting with a literary agent next month. I don't know if anything will come of it, but I'm trying, and that feels like its own kind of victory. Sometimes I think about that night, about being pinned to my living room floor, about the moment when everything changed, how terrified I was, how certain I was that I'd ruin everything, how I kissed him anyway. That's the thing about love, I guess. It requires courage. It requires letting someone see you, really see you, in all your messy, complicated, imperfect humanity. It requires believing that you're worth loving, even when that feels impossible. And sometimes it starts with a play fight, with your wrists pinned above your head, with the sudden realization that the person on top of you is looking at you like you're everything they've been searching for. Sometimes it starts with being brave enough to close that final distance and kiss them. I'm glad I was brave that night. I'm glad we both were. Because this, what we have now, it's worth every moment of fear, every risk, every vulnerable conversation. It's worth everything. Total char count, 24,847.